Guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the internet. Hope everyone is doing good. I've been meaning to make this video for a while, but I didn't have a good chance because I couldn't make it too early. Because the school that I'm talking about here, they were basically, it's a long story, but let's start from the beginning. So I signed up with this school, Akamonkai, back in 2019. The class was going to start in April of 2020, and basically, I just want to recount how this school was able to steal, and I don't use that word lightly, but I think it's very appropriate in this situation to steal 2,000 US dollars from me. Oh, I can't tell. I felt terrible while it was happening during the process. And just the fact that there wasn't much I could really do about it, that would be tough because, like, trying to take a Japanese company to court, for that amount of money, and they know that. That's the thing that really bothers me. They're just out there taking advantage of people, and unfortunately, it's not a one-off case. So let's start from the beginning. Like I said, so the class was supposed to start April 2020. I showed up in Japan on like the last day of April, and I felt lucky to get in because I got like on one of the last flights. And then when I got there, they canceled the class like the next day after I landed, and I was like, okay, whatever. Maybe it'll start in a few weeks or a few months. The next term, next session, I'll just wait around. But they became very upset, mainly immigration, because I was on a student visa, and they said, hey, you are on a student visa, but you're not studying. And then I am thinking, hey, well, that's because the class got canceled. There's a little thing called the COVID, and how do you expect me to go to class if everything is canceled? But that's just another thing. I don't want to sound like I'm railing on Japan here, but the logic of some people in Japan, like the cultural aggregate logic, is so low, and it bothers me sometimes. Like things like that. If you ask someone at immigration while they're trying to grill me, and I'm saying there's no class, you canceled it. What do you want me to do? They have no answer. Their only response is, you're supposed to go to class, period. We don't care about anything else than that. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, I obviously, I don't want to say it, but you're being a jackass. And that's probably not a word people use to describe people in Japan very often, including myself, because they don't normally behave like that. But let's say it was an exceptional circumstance, COVID. But at the same time, you would think people would show some level of flexibility, which is one of the weakest points of the population there. So, uh, anyways, it was a bad time. So what ended up happening was I couldn't study, and I was going to leave. Now, Akamonkai had, keyword had at that time, a refund policy where they said, hey, if we don't hold the class for any reason, we'll give you a refund. As soon as COVID happened and they figured out that they're going to have to cancel these classes and everything, they ever so conveniently changed their refund policy on the spot. And I wrote to Gogo Nihon, which is the agency I applied through, about this issue. And I was like, hey, they can't just do that. And they're like, oh, sorry, it's exceptional, whatever. And I'm like, these effers, like, they're just going to change, and I'm not going to get my money back. But then they were like, oh, you know what? We'll hold on to the credit for you, though. You paid for 6 months. We'll hold on to it for you. And I was like, okay, fine. I'm trying to hold on to this Japan dream and make it happen. And, yeah, I am going to come back. And I kind of, like added it, or I made it feel like to me like it was a point of resolve. Like, I'm going to keep this credit, and that's because I'm going to stay on track, and I'm not going to give up on this thing. And which I did for a long time. And then it became, apparent after the first year that a few select places, let's just say Japan, China, maybe Taiwan as well, were holding on to this COVID thing longer than you could possibly imagine. Like, other places were already wide open, going on vacation, flying around, and still they're over there doing their clamshell, their hermit thing, which is, I'm like, whatever. Okay, I can't make the rules. But yeah, so they took over a year longer than the rest of the world, probably part a year and change, the better part of 2 years, to finally reopen. And by then, so much had changed and so many things had gone on. And I was like, oh my God, am I going to have to go back? But you know what? I still wanted to do it. And I did. So 2024 came around. I had been in contact with them this whole time, sending them emails. And in a number of emails, I swear it was at least 3 emails, I explicitly wrote, hey, this is carrying over my 6 months worth of credit, my 2 terms, because 2 terms is 6 months. And I intentionally repeated that, reiterated that, made it super obvious in our communications, just so they wouldn't lose track of this fact. Now, once I finally, in 2024, I was making preparations to go there in 2025 April, because you do everything way far in advance. There was a peculiar communication between the lady at Gogo Nihon, the message she sent me, and I guess what she got from Akamonkai, and she said your 1 session will be granted for this upcoming spring season. And I was like, that's weird. One, it's not like you guys are doing me a favor. I mean, I paid for this a lot of money, because at that time the exchange rate was bad. It's not like it is now. The cost of the classes and everything in Japan was way higher. It was like $1 to 100 yen. Now it's like $1 to 150. But yeah, I was like, it's not like you're doing me a favor. I already paid for these classes. You owe them to me. You cancel the class, and now you're trying to spin this like, oh, we'll do this for you as an exception. We're treating you special. No, no, I'm not buying. Oh man, just so bothersome. So that was one thing, and then the second thing was, of course, like, what do you mean 1 session? Like, I paid for 2, and I've been saying all along, like, there's 2 sessions happening here. So I made that point back to the person who was handling, there's an intermediary when it comes to the agent, Akamonkai. And I told them, hey, I paid for 2. You have all the records. You have the receipts, literally. Like, what are you talking about? And then they came back and they're like, oh, it's just, we heard back from the management at Akamonkai. And this kind of gave me an insight into how some Japanese companies and corporations and their structure, they're very like opaque, and you can't actually talk to the decision maker. They'll have someone at the reception. They won't tell you who's actually doing it. It's a big meeting. They'll talk about it later in the week, and they'll get back to you. And it's like once they made a decision, it's like they're sending it down, they're handing it down. Like there's no actual dialogue. There's no understanding. They're not trying to figure out what's going on, if they've made a mistake or anything. It's crazy. So it was something like that, and that's when I got the hint, and I was like, huh, interesting. There's some people up there in upper management, and they're just like, for whatever reason, it's not the hugest school, right? I mean, they only have like 1 or 2 layers of management, so it's someone you could easily see walking around the school or just there in the admin office. It's just 1 or 2 people back there, and they felt like, you know what, it's been a long time. We had this little, big cough thing, as I like to call it. I don't feel like giving him the 2 sessions anymore. Yeah, it's been too long. You know what? It's been too long. Don't give him the 2 sessions. Can we do 0? No, not 0. 0 is probably too. Let's not take both. Let's just give him 1. Let's give him half of what he already paid for and what we said we would give him. So I don't know what goes through their little brains. But like, yeah, they just basically dumped it. They surprised it on me. Hey, we've changed this from 2 to 1. And there was some back and forth between me, the agent, and these Akamonkai people, the management or whatever. Oh, I can't stand these management people. If you see them, like, if you live in Japan and you just know like the type of people that work as those middle or upper managers, they're just, oh man. I don't want to make this a video, like I said, about railing on people, but those are the least likable types of people, and they behave terribly towards their employees. They treat their employees like absolute garbage. And this is another discovery that I made while I was there during COVID. This isn't a point of the video, but actually it's one of the most insightful things I learned while I was there. And I thought, before moving to Japan, one thing I thought was, how can people feel so low and bad about themselves that they would willing to neglect themselves, or do some bad things to harm themselves and stuff like that. And I just thought, why wouldn't they just leave? You always have the option to just leave. But then when I saw how some of the management there, including the management at Akamonkai, treats the employees, I kind of got it, and I kind of realized how someone could be pushed to that point. Because basically, to clarify it for you, what I witnessed was someone on the management team, they didn't like something that one of the receptionists did, and they made an example of them. Like, he stomped his foot on the ground super hard. He yelled at the girl, told her, "Get over here right now," as if it was like Mortal Kombat, like the final KO move. And she, this little, petite girl, it wasn't even a big issue, mind you. To be specific, it was just like these little cover blinds that they had just installed for COVID. I guess she forgot to put one up, and I don't know, she was like on the side of it or something. Anyways, and this guy just yelled at her unbelievably, just berated her in the middle of like an open hallway. Everyone could hear and see. And I was a customer there, and I'm like, damn, he's doing this in front of live customers. Like, it's not like it's just staff here. It's an open space. And I just thought, oh no. Like so basically she just ate it. Like, you could say she was like eating the shit, and it was terrible. And I thought in my mind, like, if I was her, I would have left right away. I would have quit that job. I would have told that guy, "Go f yourself, you piece. You don't you ever like have some humanity and decency and any number of things." But the level of just disdain and hatred that was sent from him to her, and that she just accepted and internalized, I just thought, this is unbelievable, this is unreal. So yeah, getting back on track, these management people, oh, they're the worst, the ones in Japan like that. Not all of them, but anyways, you'll know what I'm talking about if you live there. So yeah, well, they just decided one fine day, yeah, you know what, I feel like I don't feel like he should get both of the classes he paid for. I don't have to tell him to his face either. Let's just say we're gonna have a meeting about it. I decide. We tell the receptionist, and she tells the agent. So there's like multiple layers between us and him. I never have to actually feel any consequences of effing this guy over. Normally, I don't use that much profanity, but when it comes to me losing like $2,000, and $2,000 is a lot for anyone at any time, but back then I had a lot less money, so 2,000 felt like a lot to me. Now, if I lost 2 grand, I might. I don't know. It's not the same. Obviously, if you have, hypothetically, if you have $100 in your bank account versus $1,000, 500 is a huge difference based on your starting point. So yeah, that's what happened. And what also bothered me, this is just another. I got so many bad lessons from Japanese culture and corporate culture and stuff. At one point, when we're doing the back and forth, they said, if you keep arguing this, if you contest this any further, we're going to take both of your sessions away. We're going to take $4,000 from you instead of just two. End of story. We don't want to hear about it anymore. I was floored. I couldn't. I said, I didn't even know what to do when I was reading this message. And the other thing about it is these messages were going through an intermediary, Akamonkai. They're supposed to be standing up for students, standing up for their rights. It's not like I'm asking them for anything extra special. All they needed to do was prevent a school from totally taking advantage and stealing and thieving from a student. And they couldn't step in at all. Like, all they wanted, basically all they'll do is when things are good and they're just raking in the money, okay, if any problem, even a serious problem, which you would think is easy to interject, you're like, it's not a gray area thing. You're like, okay, this is clearly wrong. This is not like a little bit wrong or a maybe. No, this is effed up. And they didn't. And I told the person I was working with that, I was like, do you have no conscience? Do you have no opinion? Does Gogo Nihon have no stance on this issue? Oh man, I can't remember the name of the girl I was working with, but it's unfortunate. And she had no spine. I'm not even sure if she brought it up to the team. If she did, I feel even worse, because that means their upper and middle management people also have no real moral compass, no spine, can't stand up to their partners. They're willing to work with people who do bad, awful, terrible, criminal, illegal things, immoral things, if they'll take the payment. So that says a thing or two or three about not only Akamonkai, but the people they're working with, because they're being heavily promoted and heavily pushed by Gogo Nihon. Now, after all that happened, I was like, you know what? I'm going to be smart. I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to roll with it, accept the one instead of getting zero, I guess, because they're strong arming the F out of me. And anyway, so I showed up uh, April 2025 as if nothing was happening. I was just going fine. I was playing along. I was playing nice. And somewhere in the middle of the semester, I wrote again to Gogo Nihon and I told them about the situation. And I said, "Hey, this is really messed up. Like I'm getting railed over here by Akamonkai in this situation. I didn't want to bring it up earlier because if I did, I wouldn't even be here for this one semester that I paid for. They would have taken both of them and I'd be out 4 grand instead of two." So, and I explicitly, directly, like before, maybe I was just waiting for them to jump in or kind of lightly suggesting, like, "Hey, don't you think this is odd how they're treating a student?" But at this point, I was direct and I was like, "Guys, we got to do something." Like, and I thought they would kind of step in and tell Akamonkai, like, "Hey, this is beyond effed up. Like, you got to do something. Give this poor guy, like, your online class or something, like, as if that's any kind of consolation." But they didn't even attempt to do that, and that's what I was most disappointed with Gogo Nihon. I thought they did a fine job, and I think they would, as long as everything's going good and they can collect their commission. If you have a problem, ooh, hopefully it's not a big one, and hopefully it's nothing like the one that I encountered. But yeah, so I ended up having a fallout, or just losing all faith and confidence in them as well once I see how they were operating. Because it's easy to see how people behave when things are fine and dandy, but if any form of adversity and they can't do anything in an easy situation like that. So I don't know. I was basically done with both of them, and she came back and she was like, "Oh, but you already agreed to study for one semester." And I was like, "Well, yeah, obviously, because it was either that or zero. If someone puts a gun to your head and says, 'Hey, take this $10 instead of $0, even though I owe you $100," yeah, of course, you're being coerced. So I was like, "Oh God." And the other thing is, there's a lot of international people working at Gogo Nihon, so it's not like that fault of logic is there. Like, they know that there's an issue and they're just still willing to overlook it. Whereas when I'm dealing with some other local people there, I'm like, they're some of them, again, I'm not railing on people, local people there. They're just not used to exercising that logical section of the brain sometimes, and they're on autopilot. They're just going through the day, whatever, it doesn't matter. So stuff like that. So honestly, that time, I felt like I was working with a black company. And if you're not familiar with the term black company, it's a type of company in Japan that exploits workers, and especially or oftentimes foreigners, international people, because they know they have less recourse. It's more difficult for them. They don't know how to access resources. It's just hard for them to stand up, fight back, and fight for themselves. And that's what it felt like. I was working with a black company. And I was like, damn, this must be how some of the other people in Southeast Asia feel. Like, let's say people from like Burma and Vietnam, when they have to go and work with these Japanese companies and they just throw all these little stupid tactics and they cite all these dumb rules and things that don't make sense, that are illogical, that don't apply. And they don't talk to you face to face. They'll send someone to your agent to none. Oh, it's just unbelievable. So that's how it happened. I definitely left both of them a bad review, as if one bad review is worth $2,000. But yeah, that's just a tiny way that I was able to, I guess, do something back to let other people know that this have happened. And hopefully this video, um, for people, I guess, whoever's the only people really watching to this point will be people who are very interested in Akamonkai. Like, when I was applying and getting ready, I watched the few Akamonkai videos there are, like, in their entirety. So I definitely appreciated that. But yeah, man, that's how it happened. That is the unfortunate story of what I had. and what I had to deal with. Now, that said, I did have a good time. I made some amazing friends, but that's mainly on me because I typically make the most of whatever situation I'm in, especially when it comes to meeting people, friendships, social dynamics, and things. Thankfully, I'm not taking that for granted. I just know that had little to do with the school and a lot more to do with me. So I don't give them any credit for that. But the school itself is fine. It's just the management there is awful, terrible, despicable people. There's very few times when I think, oh man, I wish something bad happens to that person. Like it's exceedingly rare. I can only think of like another time when like I was attacked by a Russian guy in China because he liked a girl that liked me, and he tried to. I don't want to say tried to kill me, but he tried to do really bad things to me. And he did. He did. He gave me a cheap shot with wearing a ring out of nowhere, right in the eye. And I was, these are crazy things. But yeah, that's the level. And then these people who are just blatantly stealing money. I don't know. I don't know. So I know there's other layers and levels and things to unpack on the onion that is Japan. So yeah, sometimes I get tired of hearing about how amazing and how good everything is and how polite and friendly, which is totally misused word. That is not a good word to describe Japanese people. Polite. There's a difference between polite and friendly. But anyways, I don't want to get too far off on this video. I just want to tell that story of how I got royally screwed over by Akamonkai, how they strong-armed, forced, and stole $2,000 off of me and were even threatening to take a full 4,000. Just crazy stuff, but it's the unfortunate reality. So don't believe everything. And anyway, stay safe. Don't get in a situation like me. Maybe there's some other things you can do. Pay 3 months at a time if you can, if that's an option. I don't know, go with more reputable schools. Don't go during COVID or something. I don't know. Anyways, guys, if you have any questions, let me know. And good to see everyone. Let's talk soon. Take care. Bye.